Hello everyone and welcome to part 3 of the strategy design pattern tutorial series. In the previous video we implemented the strategy pattern in Java, and in this video we're going to take a look at how we can do this in Kotlin. First I'm going to pull the JSON serialization dependencies. And now we're going to create a book class, just like in the Java case. And just like in the Java case, we're going to have several strategies. We first need to define our strategy interface. And since this is a functional interface, we're going to mark it as one. We're going to take in a book and produce a string. And if we have a second abstract method in this interface, the compiler is going to complain. As you can see, because of this fun annotation here, we can't have more than one abstract method. Okay, so let's define a JSON and a YAML serialization strategy. We're going to extend our interface and implement it. We first need a serializer. And then we need to use it. And we can do the same for the YAML serializer. And finally, we need a consumer for these strategies. I'm going to create one. We're going to take a book and serialize it with a strategy on invocation. This means that every time we call serialize to format, we can specify what strategy we want the serialization to happen with. We're going to add a header and a footer to our serialization consumer. Alright, so we can use this serialization method. First, going to create a new book. And now we can use our serializer. We can provide a JSON strategy. And we need to print this. see that it works. And if we run this method, we should see a JSON serialization of our book. I think this should be book. And we should also fix this one. So now if we run this, we should see the serialization. Okay, and we can do the same for a YAML strategy. Here it is, first the JSON one, then the YAML one. We can build our own custom serialization approach. Which takes in a book and produces a string. Publisher and the authors. And we can return the build string, and we can provide this custom serialization function to our serializer. And if we run this, we should see our custom approach here. And maybe we need a new line here, but that's irrelevant. In addition to this, we can provide an anonymous function right here. And since the functional interface is the last argument that we provided to our serialization method, we can pull it out of the invocation parentheses. So I can just copy this implementation here. I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to differentiate. Final entry should actually be the return value, and I'm going to differentiate between this custom approach and this custom approach by saying that this is an anonymous custom approach. And if I rerun this, there it is. So we have first the custom approach and then the anonymous custom approach. Okay, so this was one way in which we could provide a strategy to a method argument, but in Kotlin there's a different approach. Since functions are supported as first-class citizens, so we can pass them in as arguments and return them. So I'm going to create a new method, serialize, and again we're going to take a book, but instead of a functional interface serialization strategy, I'm going to provide a function type, so something that takes in a book and returns a string. And we can do the same thing we did in the first case. Oh, but we need to provide the argument name here. Okay, so we can just invoke the serializer as a function, and I'm going to change this header to something else. And we can go to our main function and test this out as well. So I'm not gonna replace any of this, I'm just gonna use this new method that we created. And in this case, we're getting some warnings on our strategy objects because JSON and YAML strategy are not functions that take in a book and return a string, but they are interfaces that have a function that does that. So we can't really use them in the second case. I'm going to comment them out. If I rerun this, we should see our custom strategy 1 and the anonymous custom approach, plus the different headers that we defined here. And if we have a more complex type containing multiple arguments, for example, we can actually create a type alias for a function that takes in a book and returns a string. And we can create a third serialization approach that takes in this type alias here. So it's gonna be serialization function. And you would maybe use this if you had something more complex, like a book, a string, and I don't know, an integer, like several types. And we can make sure that this works as well. I'm just going to change this to 3. Oops. And maybe change the header to type div. And make sure that this works. Yep, here we see type alias with the first custom approach and type alias with the anonymous custom approach. We can actually get the JSON and YAML strategy classes to work, even though they're not functions that accept a book and return a string. Nevertheless, their method, called book to string, takes in a book and returns a string, so we can use that. And to do that, once we have a JSON strategy object, we can pass in a method reference to its book to string class. And if we run this, we should see a serialization of our book into a JSON. And here it is, some different header with a JSON serialized book. And if we take a look at what serialize in format 2 does, it first prints a some different header, then serializes the book using the strategy, and finally prints out a footer down here. And this can be a bit more readable if we pull out the JSON strategy object into a variable like this, and now we can pass the object's method reference to book to string to our serializer. And if we rerun this, we should see the same result. We get a serialized book into a JSON. And we can get the same work for the YAML strategy as well. Here it is, we get a JSON serialization of our book, and then a YAML serialization of the exact same book. And just like in the Java case, we can create a class that accepts a strategy on instantiation. So it's gonna be book So we're taking in a serialization strategy as part of our constructor. And in this case, okay, so we can use the strategy that we provided as part of our constructor instantiation to log a book. And we can test this out here. I'm going to comment all of these lines out and create a new book serializer on instantiation. We provide a function reference in this case for our strategy. And we can log all these out. And we're not printing them, so we should do that if you want to see them in the console. And there they are. First, we have a strategy on instantiation with the JSON approach, then with a YAML approach, and then with our custom approach. And we can also show that we have an anonymous approach. And here it is. Thank you for watching everyone, and see you in the next video.